Hey guys, welcome back for another video in my series on iOS interview questions. Today we're going to be talking about UIGestureRecognizers. Now I got asked to work with these about 3 or 4 times throughout my interview process, whether that was part of the coding exercise in a phone screen or part of the actual on-site technical interviews. So if you're interviewing around for jobs, don't be surprised at all if you get asked to demonstrate UIGestureRecognizers. What we're going to build today is a simple screen utilizing the UIPanGestureRecognizer. Now this was the most common gesture recognizer I had to use, so that's why I'm doing the video on it. The screen is just going to be pretty simple. You're going to tap and hold on a file, drag it across the screen down to a trash can. Pretty simple. Let's get started. So like I mentioned in the intro, we're basically just going to be able to drag this document image down here into the trash can. I'm going to walk you through the basic setup I have so you guys can recreate it if you'd like. All this is an image view. You can just Google, file image PNG and you'll find something. And then same thing here, this is an image view. And you can go ahead and Google a trash can image and make it your own. I made my background here of this view. I just made it dark gray. You can make it whatever color you like. So again, all this is 2 image views. This file image view is pinned to the top left corner and this trash can is pinned to the bottom right corner with a height and width constraint. One major thing that you need to make sure you do, because image views don't default like this, click on this file image and then make sure you have user interaction enabled, where my mouse is shaking right here. Clicking it, unclicking it. Make sure it is enabled. If it's not enabled, your gesture recognizer won't work. And this goes to whatever view you're trying to add the gesture recognizer to. Double check to make sure that's enabled. Okay, so diving into the code, basically have a clean slate here. The only thing I have is I do have outlets for my image view set up here on line 6 and 7. All right, so let's start with the basics. The first thing we want to do is add our pan gesture recognizer to our file image view. So to do that, we'll just put it in its own function. So function add pan gesture. And that will take in a UI view called view. So now we want to actually create our gesture recognizer. So let's just call it pan. Let pan equal UI pan, and it should autocomplete. And then do an open parentheses to get the initialization, target, action. That's what we want. So target is going to be self. And then action, I'm going to leave blank right now. So let's go ahead and write that function. So what goes here in the action is a selector for what function you want to write. So down here, let's go ahead and at least stub out that function. So we'll call it func handle pan. And this is going to take in a sender. And this is going to be the UI pan gesture recognizer that it takes in. So again, we're just creating that now so we can go ahead and autocomplete our selector up here. We'll fill in the code for that in a little bit. So hashtag selector. Do open parentheses and then view controller. And this is whatever the name of your screen is. Because I'm using the default view controller file for this example, it's view controller and then you do dot handle pan and it should autocomplete. Okay, so this line here, 17, has created our pan gesture recognizer. Now we just need to add that recognizer to our file view. So that's pretty simple here. But in this function right here, we're not actually adding it to our file view correctly. We're adding it to whatever view we pass in here to the function. So to do that, we just do view, because again, that's the view we passed in, dot add gesture recognizer, and it should autocomplete. And it takes in a gesture recognizer, and that's what we just created on line 17 called pan. So again, real quick walkthrough. Line 17, we're creating a UI pan gesture recognizer called pan. We're giving it the action of handle pan, which we created down here, which again is where the bulk of our code is going to go. And then once we create that gesture recognizer called pan, we go ahead and add it to our view. And the view we're adding it to is whatever we pass into this add pan gesture function here. So let's go ahead and do that. So call it here in view to load, add gestures, and you see it takes in a view, and then we'll just do the file image view that we have in our outlet above. So there we go. Now in view to load, we're adding the pan gesture to our file view. Good to go. Okay, now let's start coding up our handle pan function down here. Again, this is where all the magic's going to happen. The first thing we want to do is get our view. So let's let file view equal sender.view. And what this line does is sender, remember, is our UI pan gesture recognizer that we created up here, and it is attached to the file image view. So essentially what we just did here is we grabbed a variable called file view, and that is our file image view that we're going to work with throughout this function. Now the next thing we want to do is get a variable for our translation. Now the translation is a property of the UI pan gesture recognizer that tracks the location and velocity of the movement of the pan, which is exactly what we want because we're going to be moving the file view across the screen. So let's go ahead and grab that into a variable. Just say let translation equal sender. Remember, sender is our UI pan gesture recognizer. Dot translation, and then you notice it's translation in UI view. So the translation is accordance to the whole view of the screen. So that would be just view, because this is the view controller's main view that our file image view and trash image view are in. So again, the translation is tracking the location and velocity of the gesture within the main view on the screen. All right, now that we got our variable set for our file view and our translation, let's go ahead and handle the different states that the UIPanGestureRecognizer can be in. Now there's three main states we're concerned with. There's the began state when you start your gesture, the change state which tracks every movement throughout the gesture while you're still holding your finger on the screen, and then there's the ended state, which is when you actually lift up your finger. So as you can imagine, what we're going to do is in the began state, we're going to start our movement. Throughout the change state, we're going to keep tracking the movement and animate it. And then during the ended state, when the finger is lifted, we want to check to see if our file image view is intersecting our trash can view at all. And if it is intersecting our trash can view, we'll go ahead and delete that view. If it's not intersecting the trash can view, when they lift up their finger, we're going to animate that view back to its original starting point. Which reminds me, we need to have that starting point in a variable. So up here on line 9, let's go ahead and create file view origin. And the origin of the frame of a view is going to be a CG point. Now we know we're going to have that because we're going to set it in view did load right away. So we can go ahead and force unwrap it with the exclamation point. So down here on line 16, let's go ahead and do that. So file view origin equals file image view dot frame dot origin. Now the origin of the frame is the upper left-hand corner. Imagine if you're looking at a chart, 0, 0 for the x and y coordinates. That's what you're looking at for the origin. Okay, now that we got our origin set up, let's head back down to our handle pan function here on 25 to 34. What we're going to do now is we're going to handle all three of those cases that I mentioned, the began, changed, and ended of your gesture. So for that, we're going to use a switch statement. So switch, I can't type, switch, and go and let it autocomplete. The value that we're going to use is sender. Remember, sender is our UIPanGestureRecognizer, dot state. And again, that's because it's the states we talked about. And actually, in this circumstance, the code that's going to be executed during the began and change state is actually the same. So we can go ahead and do this. So dot began, comma, dot change. So we're handling both the began and changed in this little block of code. And for right now, I'm just going to put a break here just so I can finish stubbing out the rest of the switch statement, and then we'll go back and change this. So the next case and final case we want to handle is dot ended. And again, just for now, put a break statement in there so Xcode will stop yelling at me, and then default break just for now. And again, during began and changed, we're going to go ahead and move the file image view, and then ended, we're going to check to see if it's in the trash can or not, and we're going to act accordingly. All right, so let's get rid of this break and then start writing some actual code. I like some space here. Okay, so let's handle actually moving our file view. So to do that, we need to do file view dot center equals CG point. And so what we're doing here is we're basically moving the center of the file view along with our translation, which again, the translation was the movement of your finger essentially. So let's go ahead and initialize the CG point here, go down to just make it a float, the X and Y coordinate. So for X, we're just going to do file view dot center dot X. So file view dot center is an X and Y coordinate of the file view. So we're just going to take the X coordinate of that center, and then what we're going to do to that is add the translation. Now remember, the translation is basically the movement of your finger during the pan gesture recognizer. So plus translation dot X. And again, just the X coordinate of the translation. So that handles our file view dot center dot X coordinate. And basically just do the same thing here, but just with the Y coordinate. So file view dot center dot Y plus translation dot Y. And now that we have that new X and Y CG point, we need to go ahead and set that translation. So sender dot set translation, and this takes in a CG point in a UI view. So we're going to do just CG point dot 0. And the UI view, again, is the overall screen view. So this is just going to be view. Again, so what these two lines of code are doing are just moving the center of our file view along with our gesture recognizer. Xcode's yelling at us right now because we're not handling this file view optional. Sender.view right here returns an optional. We know we're going to have a view here because we're handling that in view did load when we added our pan gesture recognizer to our file view. So it's okay to force unwrap that. And then let's go ahead and do what Xcode says and delete this question mark here. We don't need to do any optional stuff here on line 32 because we forced unwrapped it up here on line 27. Now, side note, be careful when force unwrapping. Xcode is just going to tell you to force unwrap everything. Just be very careful when you do it. Make sure you know for sure you're going to have that object just to prevent some crashes. So let's run it real quick. All right, here we go. Go and click and drag on our dock. All right, it's moving. Cool. Moving with my mouse. Let go. I mean, it's not animating back yet because we haven't done that. But yeah, the gesture recognizer is working. We can move it all around. If you put it on the trash can, nothing really happens. Real quick, if you notice, it's going behind the trash can. Let's address that real quick. So up here in view to load on line 17, just go ahead and we'll bring this sub view to front. So view, which again is the view controller's view, dot bring sub view to front. And the view we want to bring to front is file image view. So what that does is just, if you're familiar with Z-index or anything like that, that just basically brings that view as the top layer in the view. So now when we run it again, we won't do it, we'll do it later, but the file image view will now be on top of the trash can. Just a small subtle thing, but it'll look better. All right, so let's go ahead and handle our ended state. But first, I'm going to make a note here. We're going to refactor this. We'll get into that in a second. You'll see as we do our ended view, it's not going to be the most readable code. I'm going to go ahead and code it the first time like this because it's easier to explain what I'm doing. And then we'll take a couple minutes afterwards to go back and refactor. Okay, so clean up some spacing here. This looks a little cramped. Okay, so for ended, let's get rid of this break. Again, give us some space. So the first thing we want to do is check to see if our file image view is intersecting our trash can view at all. So in order to do that, it is if file view, again, this is our variable from line 29, dot frame dot intersects, here's the big thing. So the frame, which is a CG rect on a view, so every view has a frame, and that frame is a CG rect. And CG rect has a method to see if that rect intersects another rect. So here we go, we'll select that. And the other rect we want is trash image view dot frame. So this actually reads very well. If file view dot frame intersects trash image view dot frame. I mean, you don't have to be a coder to kind of realize what's going on there. So if that is in fact the case, we're just going to go ahead and animate away the file view, kind of delete it from the screen. So do some quick animation here, UI view dot animate with duration. Go ahead and hit return to figure that out. We're just going to do 0.3 seconds. Hit return here to get the closure. And in the closure, we're just going to do file image view dot alpha. Alpha is the opacity, if you're not familiar with that. So file image view dot alpha equals 0.0. So basically, that's just going to fade it away. So let's actually test this real quick. Oh, sorry, we need a, if you're in a closure, you need the self dot. So let's go ahead and test that real quick. All right, so now when we're dragging around our file, again, it still doesn't animate back. We're going to handle that in a second. And then now if I put it over the trash can, nothing happens because I'm still holding it down. We're not in the ended state yet. We're still in the change state. So now I'm actually going to let go of my mouse over the trash can, and it should animate away. All right, letting go of the mouse, and there it goes. It's like I just threw it away. Cool. So now what we need to do is snap it back into place if it's not in the trash can. So let's go ahead and handle that. So that's just an else statement on this if. So again, the first part of the if statement is if file view.frame intersects trash image view.frame. That's when we remove it. If it doesn't, we want to snap it back into place. Again, we're going to clean up this code in a little bit. But for now, so if else, we want to basically animate it back to the origin. Now, if you remember back here, our variable here on line 9 that we set on line 16, we have our file view's origin. So it's pretty easy to animate back. So again, UI view.animate, same thing here, 0.3, hit return there, and the code's pretty simple here. So it is self.file image view.frame.origin, because remember we're setting the origin, equals, and then we're just going to call our variable that we set up there, file view origin. And again, I need myself here. Always forget that, especially when I'm trying to teach. My mind is on a bunch of different things. But anyway, let's go ahead and run this real quick, and our view should animate back. All right, here we are. So I'm dragging the document around. All right, I'm going to let go over here, and bam, snaps back. Put it over here, snaps back. Not quite to the trash can, snaps back. And then put it on the trash can, and it's gone. Cool. So essentially right now we have the working functionality. But I want to point out is, I mean, even if I clean this up, this code, I mean, it's not horrible to read. I mean, an experienced developer could probably come in and figure out exactly what's going on. However, I believe that we want to make our code as readable as possible. As someone who has read other people's code, sometimes it gets very frustrating when you're trying to like reverse engineer and dissect what exactly is going on. So I like to write my code as expressive and easy to read as possible. Like I mentioned earlier about line 39, how it just reads so beautifully. Like if file view.frame intersects trash image view.frame. I mean, that's pretty self-explanatory. So we're going to work on making the rest of our code that easy as well. But the basic functionality is complete. You have your code. If you're just here for that, that's all you care about. Go ahead, end the video now. You're good to go. But if you want to refactor a little bit and work on writing better code, stick around for a couple minutes. So in order to do this, we need to write some helper functions. Essentially what we're going to do is we're going to take line 35 and 36, put that into its own function, and then take these animations here and put them into their own functions. So it's going to be much more readable. So let's go ahead and do that here. So we need to be outside of this original handle pan function. So let's make some space here. And let's handle the... So let's go ahead and create our function that handles this movement. So we'll call it func move view with pan. That's very self-explanatory. You get that. This is going to take in a UI view because we need to know what view to move. That's our file image view. So UI view. And it's also going to take in our pan gesture recognizer. So we'll just call that sender again. And it's a UI pan gesture recognizer. And we need our pan gesture recognizer because that's what handles the translation that I mentioned earlier, which tracks the movement of the gesture. So now what we can do basically is just copy and paste lines 35 and 36. So Command X, and then down here, Command V. We're going to have to make some adjustments to it. And then up on line 30, we need to get our translation down here. So Command X, and then Command V that down here to line 60. And we actually don't need to change anything on line 60 because it's based off this sender, which again we're passing in here on line 58. We do have to change this a little bit. This is no longer going to be file view. This is just going to be the view that we're passing in here on line 58. So we can just copy view here. And if you double click on file view, it'll only highlight that, and then just do Command V to replace that with view. And again, everywhere you see file view, double click it, Command V, file view, double click it, Command V. And then here on line 63, we still have our sender up here on line 58, so we're good there. And then in view, view. So we're good. Okay, so that should handle the movement. Let's go ahead and now we need some code in here. So let's go ahead and call our move view with pan. Again, it takes in a view, which we have up here on line 29, let file view. Let's close up this space a little bit. So let's go ahead and throw in file view back in there. And sender is going to be sender because we're just passing in the sender here from line 27, which is the UIPanGestureRecognizer. So bam, we took this chunk of code here on line 60 and 64 and just made it one line right there. So you can already see it's super readable now. So during cases began and changed, what are we doing? We're moving the view with the pan. What view are we moving? We're moving the file view, and it's from the UIPanGestureRecognizer. Again, super readable. So let's go ahead and do the same thing with the animations here. I'm going to fast forward through some typing here. Okay, so all I did here on line 61 through 66 was create a function called return view to origin. This is what's going to animate our view back to the origin if we're not in the trash can. It's going to take in a UI view, which again is our file view from above. And all that does is the animate. And actually I made a mistake. Copy paste errors are dangerous. Be careful when you're copying and pasting. I basically pasted this into the wrong one. So if you look at this code, this is where I'm animating the alpha. So this should be in the delete view. So let's go ahead and Command C and then Command V down here, and then here we're going to go ahead and cut this and then paste it here. So I just basically flip-flop that code around a little bit. And then, okay, so let me explain what's going on here. So just we have a function called return view to origin. It takes in a UI view, which is going to be our file view, and I just cut and pasted that animation code from above. And this used to say file view here. I switched it out for view, but self.view is confused now. This thinks, because it's blue, you'll notice that should be the first, warning sign. This thinks it's actually the UI view of the view controller. So we need to go ahead and get rid of this self here. And then same thing down here on line 71 because there's confusion there. Another way to avoid this confusion is to, up here on line 61 here, not name this view, name it something else. We're going to keep it view for now just to save time. But that's one way to avoid that error. Name this something different or just not have the self here. And then here in delete view, you guessed it, we just basically moved that animating the alpha to 0 code down to here and replace file view with just the view that we pass in because we're going to pass in that file view. Up here in ended, now we have our if file view.frame intersects trash image view.frame. Let's go ahead and handle that code now. So if that is the case, what do we want to do? We want to delete it. So we just have delete view, and the view we want to delete is file view. Okay, again, we just took that down to one real quick and simple line of code. And then here in the else statement, we want to return to origin. So just call that return view to origin. What view? We want to pass in the file view. And then we still have our default case. So cool. We took that tricky code that you saw before, and now using these helper methods here on line 50 to 69, we basically reduced it down to a very readable code here with the handle pan. So again, in case began and case changed, what do? We move the view with the pan, and we're moving the file view according to the UIPanGestureRecognizer. And when it ends, we want to check if file view.frame intersects trash image view.frame. Again, pretty self-explanatory. If that is the case, we delete the view. What view? File view. Makes sense. And if it doesn't intersect the trash view and you let go, we're going to return this view to origin. Again, very readable. So I much prefer code like this when I'm coming into a code base. It's very easy to understand. You get what's going on right away rather than having to like really, squint your eyes and dig into the code and try and really figure it out. It saves time for your other engineers. Highly recommend refactoring your code to make it much more readable. The only downside is we did add a couple extra lines of code here, but in my opinion, that's a small trade-off to have very easily readable and understandable code. So there you go. Now you have some clean code and hopefully a better understanding of using gesture recognizers. There's your crash course on UI gesture recognizers. Now you may not get that exact question, but the principle remains the same. Just know how to move and manipulate objects around the screen using touch. And most of the other gesture types are very similar. They all have that began, changed, and ended states that we went over. So as long as you understood that, you should be good to go. All right, if you found this at all useful, go ahead and hit subscribe. I put out new videos all the time.